is a state-based group, and we focus on research and advocacy around tax and budget policy and economics. And we call ourselves progressive and practical. We call ourselves pro-business and pro-government, if you can imagine such a revolutionary concept. And the idea is that everybody knows that it's morally, there's a moral problem with rising inequality, and everybody knows that inequality is not a good thing for people on the bottom. We make an extra argument, and it has resulted in a lot of wealthy people, progressive wealthy people, successful CEOs, in embracing our cause and the bridge building we do. We make the argument that inequality is bad for business in the long run. And the evidence is overwhelming that this is true. That everything we can do to make the smartest investments possible in lifting people up, in building human capital, which is kind of a crass phrase actually, but in improving human capabilities and building infrastructure, the obvious stuff that is good for business, roads, first-class infrastructure, a cleaner economy, that all of this helps business in the long run. So we are very much in the middle of making this case, and we think we're successful at it. We've been at it about 10 years, that economic growth, that business growth, and social justice and economic justice fit hand in glove. And this is a classic understanding of economics that has really been embraced by a majority of Americans for a long time, ever since the progressive movement began to challenge the inequality of industrial capitalism 100 years ago. This has held sway, and it's worked for America, and it's worked particularly well for Minnesota, because we have been a fairer state than most. We have had somewhat higher taxes, but also a better distribution of those tax obligations, and it's worked supremely well for Minnesota and most other states that invest more in infrastructure and humans do better economically than states that are extremely low tax and unequal. So that's growth and justice. You have a blue card in front of you, and I want to emphasize that Growth and Justice's main business is researching and finding those best, smartest way, the good government that we can, the improvements in education and transportation and so forth that really move us farther down the track. But we are also very strong and have been from the beginning on the revenue side, where we get the money. We took out an ad about 4 years ago that said, and it was signed by some of the most influential CEOs, some of the most successful people in Minnesota, including Jim Polat and some others. Dick McFarland over here was a co-signer. They said, we can afford to pay.
I said Sonia.
Oh yes, Sonia and John. They're everywhere. Conscientious progressives, successful progressives are everywhere, thankfully. They said we can afford to pay more in taxes, and we can't afford not to, and it made our case. But as you engage with people who suggest that the government is their enemy, here. Oh, you didn't get it? Pull this little card out of your wallet. What it shows is Minnesota's tax incidence. This is gospel truth. This is from the Minnesota Tax Incidence Study, highly regarded study that really measures who pays how much. And as you can see, that as the deciles on the line graph show, people at the lowest end pay a much higher percentage in all state and local taxes added together, property, sales, and income, than people at the very top. It's really kind of flat for most people in the middle deciles at about 12%. At the very highest ranges, people pay a smaller percentage. And that's because even though the income tax is mildly progressive in Minnesota, the property and sales taxes are enormously regressive, a higher burden on those at the bottom and middle than those at the top. And so this is often overlooked. And what you'll see from the anti-government types is selective statistics that will focus on the income tax alone, and that is wrong. It's a mistake. It does not represent the bottom line. This is the bottom line. And actually, if you impose the federal burden on top of this, those at the top still pay a slightly smaller percentage in Minnesota. The price of government, that is the total revenues we had for everything we do in state local government was 17.5% all through the 90s on average. That dropped off after the huge income tax rate cuts in 1999 and 2000. We're foregoing about $1 billion in revenue just from those income tax cuts every year. We're now at about 16% of our resources going into public stuff, and that amounts to about $3 billion a year. Now, what is the projected deficit for the next biennium? It's about $6 billion or $3 billion a year. It's kind of amazing. What happens when you cut taxes too much, when you disinvest in the public stuff, and Ann has talked about what has happened in Minnesota, and this is a whole other topic, but on many quality of life indicators about which we were so proud, and which we earnestly believe were created in part by both private enterprise but also this public investment. We're beginning to slip notch by notch on things like health, economic growth, education investment and results, and so there's a price you pay for cutting too much and disinvesting too much in the public stuff. So I hope you can make use of this, and we'll talk at the end of the presentation a little bit about specific things you can do to advance growth and justice, small g, small j, and our organization.